You know what bugs me? The general feeling that a lot of people have that global trade is bad. It hurts labor, or it exports our jobs overseas. Fact is, without world trade, we wouldn't be able to sit here and enjoy this cup of coffee. I think trade is mostly good for us. I really believe that our elected leaders would agree with me on this, but they're only saying what the voters want to hear. I think if people really understood how trade works, if they understood the law of comparative advantage, they would think differently. And in the long run, the world's economy and America's economy would be better off for it. Meet Andy and Brad. Suppose all that Andy and Brad need in life are axes and baskets. I know that's not realistic, but we have to simplify things in an economic demonstration. Now, suppose it takes Andy 10 hours to make an axe and 4 hours to make a basket. And it takes Brad 8 hours to make an axe and 2 hours to make a basket. Clearly, Brad is more efficient in both commodities. This is what Adam Smith described as absolute advantage. Brad has an absolute advantage in axe production and an absolute advantage in basket production. Adam Smith would say that we should specialize according to absolute advantage. So Brad should produce all of his own axes and baskets, and he doesn't need anything from Andy. If they each work a 40-hour week and 50 weeks per year, they have 2,000 hours per year for production. If they devote 1,000 hours to each commodity, Andy can make 100 axes and 250 baskets, for a total of 350 units per year. And Brad can make 125 axes and 500 baskets for a total of 625 units each year, for a grand total community output of 975 units of production. Remember that number, 975. But David Ricardo had a different idea, which he describes as comparative advantage. Ricardo pointed out that when there are multiple commodities involved, one must consider the opportunity cost of various production possibilities. Opportunity cost is what must be sacrificed to pursue an alternate activity. For example, if you mow the grass on Sunday, you're going to miss the football game on TV. Missing the game is the opportunity cost of mowing the grass. If Andy and Brad have a limited amount of a resource, in this case time, for every axe that Andy makes, his cost is the opportunity to make 2.5 baskets. But for every axe that Brad makes, his opportunity cost is 4 baskets. Axes are comparatively less expensive for Andy to make, so Ricardo would say that Andy has a comparative advantage in making axes. On the other hand, every basket Andy makes costs him 40% of an axe, but every basket Brad makes costs him 25% of an axe. So Brad has a comparative advantage in making baskets. Where Adam Smith said we should specialize according to absolute advantage, David Ricardo says that we should specialize according to comparative advantage, and Andy should make only axes and Brad should make only baskets, and then they should trade for their goods. Let's say that Andy offers one of his axes for 3 of Brad's baskets. Remember, to Andy, one of his axes is worth 2.5 baskets, so if he can get 3 baskets, he's coming out ahead. Also, remember that to Brad, an axe is worth 4 baskets, so if he can get one of Andy's axes for only 3 baskets, he's getting a good deal. This is a win-win situation. In fact, any time the rate of exchange for an axe is between 2.5 and 4 baskets, trade is mutually beneficial. Now, remember that 975 figure that was the total community output when specializing according to absolute advantage? Let's see what happens when they specialize according to comparative advantage. If Andy spends the entire 2,000 hours making only axes, he can make 200 of them. and if Brad made only baskets, he could make 1,000 of them. That's a total community output, under comparative advantage, of 1,200 units of production. Clearly, our little society is more productive. Here's another way to look at this. In 2,000 hours, Andy could make 200 axes or 500 baskets. Andy can produce, and therefore consume, in quantities anywhere along this line. But as we saw earlier, his chosen allocation was 100 axes and 250 baskets. Likewise, in 2,000 hours, Brad could make 250 axes or 1,000 baskets, and his chosen allocation was 125 axes and 500 baskets. That's specialization according to absolute advantage. Now let's have them specialize according to their comparative advantage, and trade at that exchange rate of 1 axe to 3 baskets. Andy makes a full 200 axes, but trades 100 of them for 300 baskets, and look what happens on his graph. Notice that he is able to consume more goods than he could produce by himself. It's the same with Brad. He now makes a full 1,000 baskets and trades 500 of them for about 167 axes. And now Brad is able to consume more than he could when producing on his own. That's progress. So whenever trade will allow both partners to consume more than if they produced everything for themselves, they'd be crazy not to trade. And with their newfound prosperity, Andy and Brad now have a surplus of goods for which they can further trade with Chucky for his cheese or with Duncan for his donuts. All this leads to greater efficiencies and improved technologies, which means lower prices and better products and raises the living standards of everyone. And it works the same for trade between communities. And it works for trade between nations. But what happens when countries impose high rates of duties on imports or other things to block trade? Let's go back to our graph that showed Andy's and Brad's gain from trade. Remember, Andy was getting 300 baskets for his 100 axes. If his government charged an import duty of, say, 100 baskets, that would wipe out any benefit from trade. Some would argue that it would protect Andy's basket-making business, but it's actually taxing him, reducing his total consumption. So it's not just taxing Brad, it's taxing Andy too. Wouldn't it make more sense for Andy to retrain his basket makers to make more axes, so he can increase production to satisfy a world market? It's the same with Brad. Remember, he was trading 500 baskets for 167 axes. If his government charged him an import duty of, say, 200 axes, that would be taxing Brad's consumption. Wouldn't it be better for Brad to retrain his axe makers to make more baskets? So I think we should all work together to remove the barriers to world trade. Because trade enables us to improve efficiencies and technologies, to draw upon the innovations of others, to combine and recombine ideas, and ultimately advance societies and improve living standards for the whole world.